Welcome to AIPAD Talks. My name is Andra Russek. I am the chair of the Education Committee. I am also with Scheinbaum and Russek in Santa Fe, and we are members of AIPAD. And we're here today. I'm here today to present AIPAD Talks to you. As many of you know, AIPAD is dedicated to creating and maintaining high standards in the business of exhibiting, buying, and selling photographic art. With that in mind, we are thrilled that the photography show will be returning again to the Park Avenue Armory. The show will be held April 23rd through 27th, and we really hope that all of you will be able to join us. Another exciting thing that AIPAD has done this year is done our annual gift guide, where we have members offering amazing, beautiful prints for sale for the holidays. Those are available to see on our website, aipad.com. So please check that out. In today's talk, we're going to be hearing from Kaitlin Booher, the Beaumont and Nancy Newhall Curatorial Fellow at the Museum of Modern Art. And Kaitlin is going to discuss the current exhibition, Life Dances On, Robert Frank in Dialogue. The show is on until January 11th. And delves into 6 decades that followed Frank's landmark photo book, The Americans, up until his death in 2019. The exhibition features more than 250 objects, including photographs, films, books, and archival materials drawn from MoMA's extensive collection alongside significant loans. Life Dances On, Robert Frank in Dialogue was organized by Kaitlin and Lucy Gallen, as well as Casey Lee. Lucy is another curator in the department, and Casey Lee was an intern in the department. I want to let everybody know that this talk will be recorded and will be available on the AIPAD website shortly, in a week or two. Give us a little time with the holidays coming up. After the talk, we will open up the conversation for questions. Please put your questions in the Q&A if you have them. We will read them at the end, and I will read them to Kaitlin and she can answer them. I will also be putting links into the show in the chat, as well as links to the bookstore if you are interested in purchasing the publication that goes along with the exhibition. Kaitlin is the Beaumont and Nancy Newhall Curatorial Fellow at the Museum of Modern Art, and she's worked on a wide range of photography exhibitions and collection installations. Her most recent exhibition is this Robert Frank show. She has also organized other exhibitions, including Mary Ellen Mark, Ward 81, Alex Prager, Face in the Crowd, and War Games, David Leventhal. She earned her PhD from Rutgers University, where she wrote a dissertation about the history of fashion photography in the United States. Now, with that all being said, I would like to pass it over to Kaitlin so you can hear what she has to say and so we can enjoy this view of this exhibition. Kaitlin, please, and thank you for being here, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Andra. Thank you to Irene and Lydia and everyone at AIPAD for giving me the chance to share this exhibition. I'm so glad that hopefully this can reach lots of people who are not in New York City, but if you are in the city, I hope you have a chance to come visit the exhibition before it closes rather soon on January 11th. So thank you very much again. Life Dances On, Robert Frank in Dialogue is the first solo exhibition of Robert Frank's work here at the Museum of Modern Art. And it was an honor to work on this with Lucy Gallen, the curator here in the department. And we had the assistance of Casey Lee, as Andra mentioned. I've been assisting Lucy with this exhibition for the past 3 years, and it's been a true honor of my career to do so. We were able to delve into Frank's archive at the June Leaf and Robert Frank Foundation and do research at lots of important institutions with collections of Frank's work, including the National Gallery of Art and the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. And so this show wouldn't have been possible without the very generous loans of lots of different institutions. So this brings together works from the museum's collection, particularly works from the film department here at the MoMA, which contains all of the published works that Frank, film and video works that Frank made in his lifetime. as well as lots of never-before-seen footage that Frank made that was made available to us by the June Lee from Robert Frank Foundation, and especially Frank's longtime film editor, Laura Israel, who I will talk about more once we get into the show. So this is a scene that will greet you when you come into the gallery and see the first initial views of this exhibition, which combines film, video, albums, magazines, books, and is incredibly multimedia, and best shows how Frank worked between all different kinds of lens-based media throughout his lifetime. Frank is best known for a book that he published in 1958 called The Americans, which was a landmark photo book that was a result of 2 years of road trips around the US, making black and white photographs, sometimes surreptitiously, that made a real commentary about life in the US as he understood it. I like to say that Frank was born in Switzerland, died in Canada, and is one of the most important American artists of the 20th century. And I hope that this exhibition gives you a new appreciation as to why that is. He truly was able to show how visual culture and how film and photography shaped his experience of life in the US. And often that meant that he made work about very personal parts of his life, his biography, and his the way that he experienced the world. This quote, which is in our publication, really sums up what Frank was trying to do by the end of his life. And I'm going to read this. He said, "I'd like to make a film which would mingle the private aspects of my work, which is public by definition. I'd like to make a photo film and work out a dialogue between the movement of the camera and the freezing of the still image, between the present and the past, inside and outside, front and back. I would make this film in a seedy background in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, and New York. 2 houses, 2 countries, 2 points of view. One is outside cultural life, the other right in it. One is the other's refuge, both at the same time necessary and useless. In my film, and because of the very way they float in the current of my normal life, my photographs will become pauses in its flux, breaths of fresh air, windows on another time, on other places. And of course, there will be the usual stream of characters: neighbors, art dealers, caretakers, thieves, the swindlers and the swindled, and a few friends as well, not forgetting the unexpected guest. All that in 30 minutes. I'd like to make that film." So just as some context for what Frank was doing before this show begins, this is the book jacket for the US edition of The Americans, which was first published in 1958, and had a real kind of caused a lot of critical reception. People were not necessarily comfortable with it at first, and over the next decade, it became a very famous book. But Frank wrestled with its critical reception and ultimately its success for the rest of his life. So the show begins in the summer of 1958, once The Americans is published, as Frank is making a new series of work, which he called From the Bus. And it was made as he was riding the bus around New York City, looking through the viewfinder of his camera and taking pictures of people as he saw them on the street. And we like to include this image in presentations because the image on the left is made right around the corner from the MoMA at Rockefeller Center. And the image on the right shows the work as it was first ever exhibited, which was here at the museum in 1962 in a 2-person exhibition that Edward Steichen organized called Robert Frank, Carrie Callahan and Robert Frank, and included the sequence of 11 photographs, which were hung directly on the wall with no frames. And so we replicated that in this presentation and used the same sequence of photographs, and they are framed in our installation, but tried to do as close to Frank and Steichen had installed this work in the beginning. And in 1972, when Frank was thinking about his career in a retrospective way for his book, The Lines of My Hand, Frank said that this work was the beginning of something new. And so that's where we began our exhibition. And for Frank, the beginning of something new was trying to find new creative challenges and beginning to think about making films rather than photographs. And so maybe the act of looking through the viewfinder on a moving bus was something like making a film or looking through the viewfinder of a film camera. The next section in the exhibition is about Frank's circles, friendships, collaborations, documentation of artists living in the East Village in New York City, amongst beat poets, abstract expressionist painters, other filmmakers, musicians, writers, many of whom collaborated with him on the first finished film that he made, which is called Pull My Daisy, which was first debuted in 1959, co-directed by the abstract expressionist painter Alfred Leslie. And the film featured beat poets in Leslie's loft, and many then famous or currently famous painters, including the painter Alice Neel. So our show not only includes works by Frank, but it also includes works by his friends and rounds out a fuller picture of the communities and circles that he was a part of. And so this is the first example of works that are not by Frank. These are by the artist and photographer John Cohen, who served as the set photographer on Pull My Daisy. And so we have images of Frank with the poet Jack Kerouac, who provided the narration for Pull My Daisy, Allen Ginsberg, Gregory Corso, Robert's first wife, the artist Mary Frank. And so this shows the ways that Frank was not working in a solitary way by this point in his career, but was in dialogue and in community with many people who influenced his work in direct ways. And Frank himself paid homage to this moment and what he said he called the inspiration and influence of lots of different artists who were all active in New York in the 1950s until the 1970s. Many of them were students of Hans Hofmann's, and so wrestling between big ideas in art at the moment about the debates between abstract expressionism and figuration, sculpture and performance. So as Frank was making photographs and making films that were trying to break the mold of his medium, he was surrounded by artists who were doing the same in lots of different mediums. And I think it's just amazing how much he documented the artists who were around him. So when he decided to make this collage, which was made in 1985 with photographs from the 1950s and 60s, he had a huge trove to work from, and assembled them together in this way to pay homage. The subtitle of our show is Robert Frank in Dialogue, and that's important. The ways that Frank was in dialogue with other people and using text himself are two different strands or themes throughout the show, and meant to show how broad and diverse Frank's work was. Along one wall, we have photographs and case material that show Frank's sometimes commercial activities throughout the 1960s. Although he had a brief stint working at Harper's Bazaar for the art director Alexei Brodovich in 1947, he left that position as a staff photographer to work on the Americans, to travel around the world. But while in New York in the 60s especially, he did plenty of freelance projects for the New York Times, for places like Harper's Bazaar and Mademoiselle, often on assignment to make portraits about the artists I just mentioned or other writers for different profiles in magazines. And then he also had a long time gig with the New York Times, making advertisements for the New York Times. So here are some other views of portraits of people like Norman Mailer and James Baldwin that appeared later on and that appeared in magazines. This is just an incredible portrait of Baldwin that was in Mademoiselle, and the MoMA has a variant print from this same portrait setting from 1963. So I just love to think about Frank being in the same room as some of these people. The show is meant to reintroduce him into a popular culture context in a way that I don't think he's been seen before. Frank also made album covers for friends and kind of musicians who were part of his network. This is John Cohen, the photographer who we just saw. This is his band, the New Lost City Ramblers. Frank made, I think, 4 album covers or portraits of this band. And this particular image was made behind Frank's loft on 3rd Avenue and 9th Street. And it's sort of the alleyway that was between de Kooning and Frank's apartments. That's something that John Elderfield and Parker Cohen have figured out. So thanks to both of them. These are the work prints from the Leaf Frank archive for Frank's project, New York Is. And there's many of them. I wish we could have included more in the show because they show different vignettes or scenes that Frank came up with and directed that always show the New York Times Magazine in some way. And Frank had a lot of leeway in making this project. The ads appeared in places like Ad Age and kind of trade publications for magazines or for people who would make advertisements in the New York Times. And Frank gave this series a lot of credit for helping support him and his family throughout this period in the 60s. And it also gave him materials like film cameras and a lot of creativity for the project. So in the ways that Frank is working like a director in his own films, he was also directing models in these scenes for this advertising campaign. Later, Frank and the art director Lou Silverstein made a book of the advertisements that he made for the Times in a book also called New York Is, that was published in 1959. So we have this in the show as well. And this is great because these images are not widely accessible elsewhere. There are many people that Frank was lifelong friends with and worked with. And so one very important relationship that we have focused on in the show is his friendship and collaboration and kind of artistic collaboration with the poet Allen Ginsberg. This is a great example. This is Ginsberg's album cover of First Blues, and on the bottom it shows a picture that Frank made of Ginsberg and Gregory Corso in the 1950s, and above is a contemporary picture of the two of them from the 1980s. And so Ginsberg combined the two of them on his album cover. But the two worked on films together, including Me and My Brother. We also have a beautiful recording that Frank made of Ginsberg reading his poem White Shroud. So the ways that they were like always talking about what was the meaning of art, what was the role of photography, how did ideas about improvisation and personal life become the tools or the content of one's art. I think they really influenced and inspired each other for a long time. We also focus on Frank's collaborations and work with the Rolling Stones, particularly with the materials he used to make the album cover for the Stones' 1972 record Exile on Main Street. On the right is the cover of the album. Frank had made this photograph prior to the Stones using it on their album cover, but they felt it would make a great image. And so to complete the back and the interior and all of the album art for the record, Frank went to LA and filmed the Stones using Super 8 film. Brought it back to New York, printed it as contact sheets, and then cut up the contact sheets and kind of collaged together the rest of the album. So this is one of my favorite things from the show because you can see in the case on the bottom right all the different contact sheets that have pieces missing from them. So you can tell that he's cut out frames and pasted them together. And this is the kind of thing that shows the archival material that went into this exhibition, kind of beyond finished prints. The first gallery of the show kind of ends on this amazing photo montage that is called "Goodbye, Mr. Brodovich, I'm Leaving New York." It was made the year Alexei Brodovich, the art director of Harper's Bazaar, who had been formative to Frank's early career in New York, had passed away, and Brodovich had encouraged Frank to use a 35mm Leica camera rather than a Rolleiflex, and he encouraged photographers to work experimentally in the darkroom to combine different kinds of media. So here we have strips of 16mm film printed together, not as a square. It's kind of off kilter, and this features lots of different footage, and to me is about Frank leaving New York, saying goodbye to the commercial world of art and the magazines that he was working with, and kind of turning a new chapter, which is when he and the artist June Leaf decide to move to Canada. So he's trying out kind of different ways of making art, of making still photographs from his films and montaging different images together. And one thing that really prompted this new way of making images was the second book project that Frank made, which is a book called The Lines of My Hand. It was published in Tokyo and the US in 1972, and it was a retrospective view of Frank's career up until that time. And it takes its title from a 1949 photograph that Frank made in Paris of a fortune teller's booth that says in French, "The Lines of the Hand." And it features on the US edition of the book a drawing by June Leaf, and one, I think, beautiful little clip of footage that we have in the show shows June drawing her own hand in different iterations and that's what we see on the right here for the book. And I think there's so much that could be said about this project, but the ways that Frank is making art that is biographical and retrospective. He's thinking about fate and the present. His work is also becoming increasingly handmade at this time, and so the ways that this book includes the word hand and features a drawing. I think that it's a really rich book to unpack. These are just some photographs of different pages from the book that show both montages of images that he had made previously, and also montages that he made of his films in order to represent them in book form. So he's combining, like I showed previously with the Goodbye Mr. Brodovich collage, he's combining all different kinds of images that he's made into these film strips, into these collages. And here's a nice example of one work that shows, I think, it shows this paparazzi scene, but he's combined images in such a way that it's sort of like a contact sheet, but it shows this chaotic scene even more so because of the layering and the kind of grid. This is a nice example of Frank kind of returning to his archive and printing work in a new way and moving beyond the single image. Ed Grozda was so generous in speaking with us about different points in Frank's career and how Frank kind of approached printing, and Grozda said that Frank wanted to show how the photograph was not some window into the world, but a piece of photographic paper that you could do something with, and how much he liked the magic of the darkroom. Sid Kaplan, who was Frank's longtime printer, was also so helpful in talking about Frank's process with printing photographs and exactly that, his manipulations in the darkroom. One second. So after The Lines of My Hand, we move into the third and final gallery of the exhibition, which is about Frank's move to Canada, his relationship with June Leaf, and the last few decades of his life. So this first view is meant to be sort of a bulletin board of lots of different images that he made, mostly in Mabou, where he and June bought a house in 1972. They We're looking for a place that was far away, that was a dramatic, very different landscape. And it was important to June that they truly commit to living there, that they not just live there in the summertime, but be there also in the winter and be a part of the community. And it fundamentally changed both of their approaches to their artwork. Frank didn't have access to darkroom printers nearby, so he started using Polaroid and instant prints. He was making photographs. He was also making films. He was staging locals. There were other artists who lived nearby, like Joan Jonas, Richard Serra, Philip Glass, and so there was an artistic community there, and some of those people appear in Frank's films, like Keep Busy, which was made in 1975. And so this wall includes photographs and films from this moment. Frank was thinking about how text and language and photo and photography and film worked together. This is a piece of fabric, I think, that said the word words, and it would have been used as a placeholder when he was making a film for what would ultimately be a title slide. And it appears a lot in his works. He photographed it, he hung it on the clothesline, as you can see. This is a kind of double image, so perhaps this is meant to be like a film strip. But Lucy Gallen's essay in our exhibition catalog talks about Frank's engagement with text and language and this moment in Canada in really beautiful ways. So I encourage you to seek it out. Here are two other examples of how the landscape and how this change of place impacted the form of Frank's work, and also June's. The work on the bottom is the only work in the show that is co-signed by the two of them, and it's rare. They did not do this very often, but this shows the view of the coast from their house in Canada, and is a panorama stitched together from lots of instant prints that June or Frank has kind of colored on using things like pastel. And so they are thinking about how to kind of splice up the landscape and paste it back together and add to the image and add to the frame. The work on the top, Bonjour Maestro Mavu, is an amazing work. It's incredibly layered. It features two strips of a panorama of the same landscape that Frank has photographed and then cut up into pieces and pasted back together and put into this frame. And then he hung it in front of the landscape and rephotographed it. And on the top is a note to his publisher in France, the publisher Robert Delpierre. And so this is the first example of many in the show where we see Frank using photography and a letter or a note in some way as a way to address someone. And so similarly to what I just said, Sarah Greeno's essay in our catalog talks about Frank's letter writing and kind of communication style and the ways that he would use photographs as a surface to write letters to people who were important to him in his life. And it's a beautiful use of photography, and it's I think representative of how Frank was always kind of in communication and in really oblique ways sometimes, but the people in his life were important to him, and he made art about them. Another great example of using instant prints, Frank and Leaf were dependent on the electricity poles, the mailboxes, the telephone wires as kind of connections to the outside world. And we see that in works like this, Monument to Electricity and Photography, that are kind of celebrating how they were able to communicate with the outside world. We have a kind of gallery wall installation of June's work from this time period. Again, we see the landscape from their house. This is a view sort of out the window, and all of the works except one in the show by June Leaf feature Polaroids or instant prints. Many of them feature images of Robert. One of them features another of their neighbors in Canada. And so we see how she's working in an interdisciplinary way between drawing, painting, photography. June Leaf shows up a lot in Robert Frank's work, and so it's nice to see how she represented him too. Many of these works have hands coming out of the lower frames, and so I think it's a nice way to circle back to the idea of works being incredibly handmade, and the cover of The Lines of My Hand. Many people, when talking about Frank's work, will talk about June's incredible work ethic and the ways that she was so committed to making art, and how that had a real influence on Robert. So I hope that is something that kind of comes through in the installation that we have here. At this point, Frank's daughter Andrea passed away in 1974 when she was 21, in a plane crash, and it had a profound influence on Frank's life, and his approach to art making. His work became increasingly personal and often featured monuments or kind of homage to Andrea. And so the film Life Dances On, which is from 1980, which we see a frame of here, and then a work that was made from footage from the film, it was made kind of in memory of Andrea, and also Frank's longtime friend and collaborator, the artist Danny Seymour, who had died the previous year. So Life Dances On is about the ways that art and family kind of help Robert move on with his life, and also pay homage to people he had lost. So the idea of making monuments or celebrations of someone's life, that's a prominent theme from this point on. Here we also see Frank using Polaroid enlargements to make multi-panel works, and playing around with combining imagery and printing Polaroids at a larger scale. This work features his son Pablo and his girlfriend at the time, Sandy, and it shows a couple different monuments in one that is here in New York, in Central Park. This is a close-up of the photo that was in the installation view that I just showed. But this is a scene from Life Dances On where June is kind of looking through a prism, and so it's something sort of 1920s Ziva Vertov style, but shows like the very evocative scene of June's eye kind of vignetted within the landscape in Canada. And in this film, June asks Robert, why do you make these films? And later, kind of in reflection, he responds, because I'm alive. So ideas of, still moving on with one's life in the face of terrible tragedy, is a theme of this show. It makes it's I think incredibly relatable, but also incredibly sad. And I think it's also very brave to make such personal art about one's life, and about loss. Moving into the 1980s, the show continues with the next book that Frank made after The Lines of My Hand, which was called Flower Is, which you can see on the left-hand side of this installation photograph. We also have footage of Frank and the Japanese publisher Kazuhiko Motomura sequencing Flower Is. Motomura is, I think, like Allen Ginsberg, an important collaborator and interlocutor of Frank's. They really understood each other, and the ways that Motomura drove Frank to combine images in interesting ways and present his work in beautiful publications, I hope comes through in the show. And the show is certainly punctuated and structured by Frank's books throughout the years, which were a primary way that his work was distributed. This part of the show features works that were included in flower is, and also some kind of combination Polaroid prints. So we see Frank taking Polaroids, adding text to them that is about kind of diaristic moments in his life, or kind of paying homage to people once again, and kind of making interesting juxtapositions out of individual Polaroids to make one finished work. This gallery is about a couple of different things. One is Frank's beginning to use video instead of film when he was making moving imagery. To Frank, a video was, he said a video is like a pencil because one could erase it and re-record something, as opposed to 16mm film, which was expensive and sort of one-time use. So Frank began to make video about his life as he roved around and throughout his day. And the first kind of finished video he made was called Home Improvements in 1985. And he kind of turned that back into a photographic work, which I'll show you in a moment. Frank also started to make music videos. So we have music videos that he directed for New Order and Patti Smith. The section also has an album with a photograph that Frank made of Tom Waits for an album cover. So again, showing Frank within a popular culture context, I think shows another side to this important artist. And this is a large-scale Polaroid work that Frank made from his video, Home Improvements, which was about his son Pablo's struggles with mental illness, June's different a stay in a hospital, and Frank moving between Nova Scotia and Canada, New York, trying to support them both. So it shows, he's taken a video screen and zoomed in directly with this large format, expensive kind of film that was made in a project that was organized by Bill Johnson and Susie Cohen called the Creativity Project. And it was a chance for Robert Frank, Robert Heineken, Dave Heath, and I have forgotten the last artist, a chance for 4 artists to come together and make projects using the large format Polaroid camera. The last gallery is about the last decade of Frank's life, which was increasingly about his memories, his kind of epistolary communications with friends and fellow artists, and kind of making scenes around the house where he was photographing things that reminded him of people in his life. He was increasingly working with Polaroid, and for each year of the last decade of his life, he would have made a book with the publisher Gerhard Steidl, collaborating with his assistant and editor Ayumi, and so together they would sequence a book and over an entire year, and then Steidl would publish it. So those are known as his visual diaries. The last film that we have in the show is called Flamingo, and you can kind of see it in this frame. It's a short film that was made with Super 8 footage from 1996 that is about primarily making or building a new foundation under Robert and June's house in Canada. And I think that serves as something of a metaphor for shoring up one's life. And many of the photographs throughout this gallery are stills from scenes in this film. So there's nice connections between the still image and the moving image, truly through the end of Frank's life. This last section is called Memory Helps You, like stones help you reach the shore. And I think one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning is that each of the section texts in the exhibition is a quote by Roberts. So the element of dialogue and his language comes through in many different ways. And these are kind of snowdrifts and I guess icebergs that he's found in Canada, but combines different kinds of Polaroids. And I think to me is something of this idea of stones helping you reach the shore. His photographs are like he liked a selfie. There's his own reflection or shadow appears in several of the final works that we have in the exhibition. So he's showing up in very direct but oblique ways. And in this one, you can see him in the reflection. And this print is called "Would Like to Exchange Cards with You, Souvenirs Preferred." And he's actually written his P.O. box on the surface of the print. And kind of in the foreground of the image, you can see lots of different postcards of Niagara Falls that Frank had collected. And the last wall of the show is dedicated to Frank's last book that he made in 2019, which is the same year he passed away, called Good Days Quiet. And it's certainly a quiet look around his house in Canada. We were very lucky to be able to borrow this painting that's in the center top of this image by June Leaf from 1972, which appears in the book. Had been hanging in their house in Nauvoo until we borrowed it for this show. And so we have the book maquettes and final book that Frank produced. And I hope that this overview gives you a new appreciation for the many different media Frank used throughout his life. He's best known maybe for being a still photographer and using 35 millimeter film, but Polaroid, 16 millimeter film, video were equally important media to his process. And finally, I want to share with you a related installation that we have in our film galleries downstairs at MoMA. And this is a related exhibition that I organized along with Lucy Gallen and Josh Siegel, who's the film curator here at MoMA. And we worked in close collaboration with Alex Bingham and Laura Israel and the June Leaf and Robert Frank Foundation to show something that would be a supplement to Life Dances On, which is called Robert Frank's Scrapbook Footage. And it features both these two kind of single channel videos that Frank made in 1971 around New York City, and then a 6-channel piece that Bingham and Israel designed together to show lots of different unpublished footage that Frank made throughout his lifetime. And so they've edited it together in this beautiful way. I'm working with the sound designer, Dean Hurley, to make a scrapbook installation of the like a sampling of film and video that Frank made throughout his lifetime. And Laura Israel said in a lovely way that Frank recorded every day of his life, and that often it was kind of test material for things that would show up in finished films that he would produce. But this incredible archive of his life, I think is an unusual thing for an artist, and it anticipates the ways that I think so many people today make films or make short videos on their phones and will send them to friends or post them online in a way to share their experiences. And so this installation shows Frank narrating around different parts of his house. It shows him traveling to places like Beirut and Moscow. It shows him at his parents' house in Zurich, certainly in New York and Nova Scotia. And so the ways that Bingham and Israel edited this together, I think it's incredibly moving and funny and personal, and I hope you get a chance to see it. It will be on view a little bit longer than Life Dances On, so you'll be able to see it here through March of 2025. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm so grateful for the chance to hopefully bring this exhibition tour to a broader audience for those of you who are not in New York. And with that, Andra, I think we can open it up to questions.
Wonderful. Thank you. That was great. I feel like I was kind of in the room, which since I can't be, I thank you so much for showing us everything. Everyone, if anyone has questions, please put them into the Q&A. I want to share with all of you in the chat, I'm sharing with you the link to the exhibition if you'd like to see it online. And then In addition to the exhibition, there is a publication that you all put out, right?
I have it here.
And what's that? Oh, it's right there. Look, there you
There's
go.
the book. It has the amazing kind of film stills of June Leith from Life Dances On. And so I hope you enjoy
And
it.
it can be yours. I just put a link into the chat as well to the store. And I have a couple questions coming in. Well, a couple thank yous. The first question is the book, I mean, you might have just answered this. I might have missed it while I was putting the link in, but who published the book?
MoMA.
MoMA, okay. That was one question. And then let me hold on. I'm sorry. I'm going back. I think there's a question in the chat. Can you describe the collaborative process with your colleagues over the 3 years of pulling all this incredible material together?
Yes. So I should say that the kind of roots of this exhibition go back many years in the department. And so people like Sarah Meister and Clément Charoux are also to thank for their roles in bringing in some important gifts of late Robert Frank works that began ideas here at the museum for a show of this kind. And so when I joined, I have a position that one can work in an in-depth way on one exhibition for like the length of your fellowship. And so as soon as I started here, I began going to the Leif Frank archive with Lucy, going through materials that they had and starting to think about the entire collection that we have here and what would make sense as an exhibition that that showed the different collaborations and different people in Frank's life that influenced his work. So.
Thank you. I will also say that I was, you know, when you look at the Americans, I don't think of it as a extremely intimate and personal project. And this work after it just seems to get more and more personal as it goes along. And I don't know if you have any comments about that, but it really does seem like you know, throughout his life and whatever happened in his life, things got more and more personal for the work. And did you find that? And did you find that that was an interest for you as you went along?
Yes, I think you know, I will always love the Americans, and I think it's such an important book. And what I like about this show is that it shows an artist's thought process in working through what is acceptable content for art, what is like I think he was just always trying to show what his truth was and what his experience was, and that results in lots of different experimentations. And things happened in his life that were unavoidable to, I think maybe he could make art or not make art at all. So I'm not sure that yeah, I think he had no other choice but to start making increasingly personal art. And I think it really anticipates art today.
I'm going to read another question to you. Do you think his American Jewish upbringing affected his work?
Yes, I think, you know, growing up in Switzerland as a German Jew, he did not gain citizenship in Switzerland until he was in his 20s. He was like a young man kind of living through World War II. There was a lot of uncertainty about nationality, identity, class that he wrestled with. He had a kind of upper middle class upbringing. He like wasn't as interested in maintaining that, and that wasn't kind of how he chose to live. But I think religion is a really interesting theme throughout all of his work. That would be an interesting lens to approach Robert Frank with.
The next question that we have is, why do you think he was so interested in so many photo technologies, Polaroid film, video, collage, etc.?
he, he was trained in precise 19th century analog photographing and printing methods, and he spends the rest of his life kind of trying to undo that and break the molds. And I think people who knew him have talked pretty widely about how he was just always picking up whatever camera he came across and always interested in trying the new thing. And I think that if he had been a little bit younger, we would have just hard drives and hard drives of camera videos and photographs that maybe he would have made. But he was always kind of undermining and experimenting with whatever media he had at hand.
And he seemed very open to new technology.
Yes.
In a way, and using old technology in a new way. So that's kind of nice. It doesn't seem like he's the type of person who would say, oh, you can only use a 35mm camera. You can only use film. So, yeah.
And in case I didn't say it before, Polaroid was important to him because he could see the image right away, and because he could use maquettes to arrange grids of images that his printer would then take and translate in the darkroom. And so in Canada, he did not have a darkroom, and so Polaroid was both like a novel technology to him and just an essential one. So
I'm going to ask one more question. I might ask two. We'll see how much time we get through. But this question starts, I'm fascinated by the artwork with the hands in the foreground and the open window in the distance. Can you speak more about the theme of hands in Frank's work?
Yes. So like I said, I think that the role of like photography is often somewhat removed from the body. There's a mechanical quality to it. One goes into a dark room and projects an image and prints it, and it's not as much a result of one's hands as painting or drawing. And I think being with June Leaf and seeing her kind of restless experimentation in her studios and the ways that she kind of inserts herself into her works by including her hands, it really reminds you that she made that work. I think that influenced Frank a lot.
Well, I think those are all of our questions, unless someone has one
Thank
more
you for
type
great
quickly.
questions.
I want to thank you so much for giving us your time and showing us this exhibition. And I hope that all of you on this Zoom will, if you're in the New York area before the January 11th, excuse me, that you will get over to MoMA and see it all in person, which we know is the best way to enjoy it. We hope you get there. And for those of you who can't, please go onto the website, check out the show online. The book is available in the store, as we said. AIPAD, we're so thrilled to have you, and we're all thrilled to have all of you attending this talk. And we just want to wish everyone a happy holiday season and a happy new year. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you all for coming, and we look forward to more talks in the new year. And we really are looking forward to the AIPAD, the photography show in April. So we hope that you'll all be able to join us then. Kaitlin, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andra.
All right. Bye, everyone. Happy holidays.